Hello everybody, this is Albert with Green Tea House. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to talk about what exactly is Ceylon tea. Now before I begin, I highly recommend you check out our back catalog of episodes, especially the fundamentals of tea. Also, I'll make sure I put some episodes that are germane up here. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell and post a comment if you ever had tea that is from Ceylon. So what is Ceylon tea? Ceylon tea is historically been a black tea that has been made on the island of Ceylon, today known as Sri Lanka. That's at the tip of India. And we used to call it, or we still call it Ceylon tea, and the nation of Sri Lanka used to be called Ceylon because that was the name of the British colony. So if you hear British and tea, almost always think of black tea. And if you haven't watched the episode on the history of tea, the British were tea crazy, like much of Europe in the 1700s and 1800s, and they wanted to have their own supply of tea. So they smuggled some China bush out into India to plant it over there, and they also found some Assam bush, and then they started growing their own tea for their domestic markets. And they realized, hey, Ceylon's a good place. It works over here. Let's start growing some over here. So Sri Lanka or Ceylon, they're essentially interchangeable, even though the nation is called Sri Lanka, has a very unique terroir. It has a very unique location because it is an island that is subtropical, gets tons of rain, but it's also very mountainous. And because of all these geographic variations, the Assam bush is the one that grows really well here. And the Assamica bush is the one that we get the majority of our black teas, whether it be iced tea black tea or Fannings, the low-grade stuff that you get in tea bags, or orthodox or whole leaf tea. Almost all of this, it comes from the Assam bush. You get some exceptions. We've talked about Lapsang Souchong and some other Chinese black teas, but the majority of black teas that you're drinking in iced tea or at your tea shop or whatever are going to be from the Assamica bush, because the Assamica bush is more tropical, it's tolerant of humid weather, and the leaves are bigger, and it has a more robust taste, and all these kind of fit perfectly for commodity or bulk tea, which is iced tea and low-grade tea. So interesting history with Ceylon is that they were really big into the spices. They historically were exporters of cacao, cinnamon. You think of Ceylon Ceylon is a high-grade cinnamon. Cassia is the low-grade cinnamon. And they used to grow coffee, and then there was this major coffee blight that happened in the 1850s that wiped out coffee. And so all these coffee planters were like, oh no, what do we do? And so like, hey, tea could grow here. And one of the reasons there was a blight, because there was an insect that was destroying the coffee. So this insect didn't destroy the tea. So they started growing tea and cultivating tea, and it got bigger. And so when Ceylon became an independent nation, it became Sri Lanka, they saw that tea leaves, so to speak, and they realized, hey, we historically have made orthodox or loose leaf black tea, but CTC is the way to go. Let's get into this kind of gold rush of iced tea. This is maybe a few decades ago. And so even though they were well known in the West, America and England, for having like really good high quality orthodox black tea, so loose leaf black tea, they're like, yeah, let's shove that out the window. We're going to start doing CTC because we need to get into this iced tea market and low grade market. And so they did that like in the 90s, and then it was disastrous. It was disastrous because they realized that, yes, there's a market for iced tea, but now you're competing with Kenya, you're competing with India, you're competing with a lot of little countries that really don't have a tea market, but they all export CTC. And so CTC, because there was so much competition for this kind of low-grade tea, they weren't earning as much, and so they weren't as profitable, and given the worker wages and all these things, CTC just didn't work. And so the Sri Lanka Tea Board was like, yeah, let's go back to orthodox. So more recently, in the last 20 years, now they're doing what they do best, which is orthodox tea. They kind of threw out CTC, and they're leaving that to Kenya and other places to do CTC. So when you think of Ceylon tea, there's going to be a lot of different variations of Ceylon tea and a lot of different cultivars, simply because the country has different terroir and the country has different climates. So it has all this monsoon rain that comes up from the Indian Ocean, but there's mountains there. So if you're on the leeward side or if you're on the wayward side, really determines what kind of tea you make, because tea is based on the terroir, right? So probably most famous Ceylon tea is going to be, they're white tea. They're silver tipped white tea. And then they also do just some good quality black tea. So it's known to be kind of very robust and clear. I wouldn't say it's like Nilgiri. So Nilgiri, we just did that episode, I think the previous episode. That's in southern India, so very not far from Sri Lanka at all. So they're known for a different type of black tea, but I would tell you, like, as a whole, Nilgiri tea is mostly CTC. But Ceylon tea, if you can find it, I would tell you, there's going to be a lot on the market. I would tell you to avoid the tea bag version of any Ceylon tea. I would tell you to avoid the tea bag version of every tea. But if you really want good Ceylon tea, I'd probably go with the higher grade Pico or the higher grade Ceylon tea. And then also go, because they do grow green and oolong and white. They grow quite a bit. And if you want to know if you're getting legit Ceylon tea, it's going to have the logo stamped by the Sri Lanka Tea Board on it. It's a lion. That's how you know it is legit Ceylon tea, whether or not you're getting their traditional black orthodox or if you're getting their green or their oolong, or probably what they're most like well known for is their silver tipped white tea. The other thing about Sri Lanka is interesting is that most countries like China, Japan, their harvest season is about March. They start with March with the buds and so forth, and then they run through the summer. But in Sri Lanka, because they're so close to the equator and because their climate's very different, they're plucking in January. And in fact, they pluck year round. They're one of the few countries, because of their rain and because their proximity to the equator, they're plucking in January. They're plucking, in China, the tea bush is dormant during that time, but they're plucking in January, they're plucking in February, they're plucking all the time. They're plucking all the time. And then like every 4 or 5 years, they will prune all the tea bushes, and these are mostly Assamica, right? They're going to prune them down to like 5 inches from the ground, and then the Assam bush grows really fast again. And so that's what they do. So that's another unique thing about Ceylon tea. So in closing, what is Ceylon tea? Ceylon tea is historically, classically black loose leaf tea that comes from the Assamica bush, but now they're growing a wide variety of the 6 categories of tea, but mostly it's going to be white with some greens and oolongs, but mostly just think of black and then think of silver tipped white. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you what your history with Ceylon tea. And if you go to England or whatnot, you're going to see Ceylon tea blended with some other well-known black teas like Darjeeling or Nilgiri or Assam to get these kind of English blends, which we have an episode on what is English tea. Guys, post in the comments. Until next time, take care. God bless.